The envelope hit Mara Chen's desk at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. No stamp, no return address, no name. Just a single printed sentence inside, black ink on white paper, clinical and cold as a death certificate. Elias Voss has never been in the same room as another human being. Mara stared at it for a long time. She turned it over. She held it up to the light. Then she did what any burned out, broke, recently fired investigative journalist would do at midnight with nothing left to lose. She opened her laptop, poured the last of her cold coffee, and typed his name. What she found, and what she would spend the next 72 sleepless hours unraveling, would not just end her career. It would make her question whether the world she thought she lived in had ever been real at all. Elias Voss was, on paper, one of the most powerful men alive. His estimated net worth hovered around $47 billion. His portfolio touched payments, logistics, media, healthcare data, and private defense contracting, industries that had nothing in common except that they all quietly funneled revenue into a single holding company registered in a jurisdiction that required zero public ownership disclosure. Thousands of employees worked inside his empire every single day. Products bearing the fingerprints of his investments sat in the pockets and kitchens and hospital rooms of millions of ordinary people. And yet, no verified photograph existed, no recorded speech, no confirmed physical appearance at any board meeting, any product launch, any legal proceeding, ever. Every signature was a proxy. Every press release was issued through a representative. Every journalist who had ever tried to trace him personally had, at some quiet point, simply stopped trying. Mara told herself it was eccentric. She had seen eccentric billionaires before. She told herself it was privacy. She had covered privacy obsessives before. She kept typing. She kept pulling threads. And the more threads she pulled, the colder the room seemed to get. She found a photograph first, archived on an obscure technology conference website, dated 2009, captioned with his name. A tall man in a dark suit, half turned from the camera, jaw sharp, eyes unreadable. She stared at it for 20 minutes. Then she ran it through an image analysis tool she had used on a story 2 years ago. The result came back in seconds. The face was composite, digitally constructed, multiple source images stitched together with software that had not even been widely available until 2014, 5 years after the photograph was supposedly taken. Mara pushed back from her desk. She stood up. She walked to her window and looked out at the empty street below and said out loud to nobody, "That's not possible." But it was possible. And it had been sitting in a public archive for over a decade, and nobody had looked closely enough to catch it. She went back to her laptop and searched for the conference organizer. The website had been last updated in 2009. The domain registration was private. The contact email bounced. She found a former employee next, a logistics manager named Daniel Reeves who had worked inside one of Voss's subsidiary companies for 6 years before quietly departing 18 months ago. He had left a handful of comments on an industry forum, careful and vague, but with a current between the lines that made the hair on Mara's arm stand up. She messaged him through the forum at 2 a.m. By 3 a.m., he had replied. "I can't do this over text," he wrote. "Meet me Thursday. I'll send the location." Mara exhaled for the first time in hours. She wrote back immediately. "I'll be there." Thursday came. The location arrived, a coffee shop 40 minutes outside the city, anonymous and unremarkable. Mara drove there in the rain, heart loud in her chest, recorder charged, notebook open on the passenger seat. She sat at the corner table he had specified. She ordered coffee she did not drink. She waited an hour. Then 2. Daniel Reeves never came. By the time she drove home, his forum account had been deleted. The posts were gone. The username returned a blank page. She tried the email address embedded in his forum profile. Undeliverable. She searched his name across every platform she had access to. LinkedIn, public records, professional directories. It was as though Daniel Reeves had been neatly, quietly, surgically removed from the surface of the internet overnight. Mara sat in her parked car outside her apartment building in the dark and rain and felt, for the first time, genuinely afraid. "Someone is watching this," she said to herself. Her voice sounded strange in the silence. Small. "Someone is watching me search." She almost stopped. She would later think about that moment, the moment she almost closed the laptop and walked away, and wonder how different everything would have been if she had. But she did not stop. Because the journalist in her was louder than the fear. And because the envelope had come from somewhere, and somebody had sent it for a reason, and she needed to know what that reason was. The answer, when it finally came, was worse than anything she had imagined. It took her another 36 hours, 3 dead ends, 1 encrypted document dropped anonymously into a file-sharing link posted in a private forum she had infiltrated 6 months ago for an unrelated story, and 1 phone call with a source she had protected for 4 years and would never name, but it came. Elias Voss was not a person. He had never been a person. He was a legal construction, a fabricated identity, meticulously assembled over 2 decades, shared and operated by a private syndicate of 9 ultra-wealthy individuals spread across 4 continents. Each member contributed assets. Each member maintained plausible distance. Together, behind the name and myth of a man who did not exist, they controlled more combined wealth than the GDP of most nations. The genius of it was devastating in its simplicity. By distributing ownership across 9 people under a single fictional identity, they had made accountability structurally impossible. You could not sue Elias Voss. You could not subpoena him. You could not compel his testimony. You could not freeze his assets, because his assets legally belonged to a name attached to no birth record, no passport, no biometric data, no human body. 3 separate government investigations across 2 decades had tried to pierce the structure and failed. Not because the evidence wasn't there, but because the legal architecture had been built, brick by brick, to ensure that even if you found the room, the door had no handle. The mystery had not been an accident. The gaps, the absence of photographs, the untraceable proxies, none of it was the byproduct of a paranoid recluse. It had all been engineered. The shadow was not something Voss had hidden from. The shadow was the entire point. A man with no shadow cannot be followed, cannot be cornered, cannot be held. And then Mara found the thing that broke her completely open. The anonymous tip that had started everything, the envelope, the single sentence, the breadcrumb that had led her down 72 hours of rabbit holes. She traced it back. It had not come from a whistleblower. It had not come from a disgruntled insider or a rival or a conscience-stricken proxy. It had come from inside one of Voss's own companies. From a communications division that specialized, according to its own internal documentation, in what they called narrative redirection. Mara had not been investigating Voss. She had been used by Voss, or by the 9 people behind him, to flesh out a real whistleblower who had been getting too close to the syndicate's financial structure. Her search, her inquiries, her contact attempts had been a net cast into the water. Daniel Reeves had not been a source. He had been a test. And the moment he responded to her, he had been identified, located, and silenced. She had done that. Without knowing it, she had done that. Mara closed her laptop. She sat in the dark of her apartment for a very long time, not moving, not thinking, just breathing. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and walked outside into the cold night air. She stood on the pavement in front of her building and looked up, at the cameras mounted on the streetlights, at the sensors above the convenience store across the road, at the small blinking light of a drone passing silently overhead. She had spent 3 days trying to find a man who did not exist. And somewhere in the process, without ever meaning to, she had made herself visible to the people who had built him. She never published the story. There are those who would say that was cowardice. Mara Chen would say it was the first intelligent decision she had made in 72 hours. Because 3 of the 9 individuals behind the Voss syndicate had, between them, the resources to erase a person from public record so completely that not even their absence left a mark. She had already watched them do it once. The billionaire who never cast a shadow was never real. But the darkness he left behind, in the systems, in the structures, in the invisible architecture of power that surrounds ordinary life every single day, that was real. That had always been real. And the most terrifying thing Mara Chen took away from those 72 hours was not what she had found. It was how long it had been there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to look, and how quickly the light went out the moment she did.